right, welcome everyone to this library webinar on Introduction to Referencing. Thanks for joining us. So my name's Michael and I am a teaching and research support librarian at the university, and I'm joined by my colleagues Ben and Zoe, also teaching and research support librarians. And yeah, we're going to give a little bit of an introduction to referencing. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Awabakal people, the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm zooming in from today, and also the traditional owners of the lands from wherever you're zooming in from as well. Everyone's online today, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So just a little bit of housekeeping first. Ben and Zoe will be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions as we're making our way through the presentation, please pop them in the chat, and we'll also stop for questions at the end. So if you have something that you want to bring up at the end, we'll stick around at the end and answer any of those questions then as well. The session is being recorded and you will be sent a recording, and it will also be available on the website with other past webinars. So you will be able to get access to that. And also today we have closed captions enabled. So if you would like to see subtitles, you can turn them on or off as you need to. All right, now just to get started, we have a poll. So Ben, if you would be able to, or I think I can do it actually. There it is. So just a couple of questions. If you would be able to pop some answers in there, that will help us to make these webinars better, and also hopefully, yeah, get you thinking about what you'd like to get out of the session. Okay, should be up and running again now. I'll just give you a little bit of time to pop a couple of answers in there.
That's 100%.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for answering that. That's really helpful. We've got a couple of other questions for you at the end. All good. Now I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so today we're going to talk about an introduction to referencing, as I said. Now, in this session, we're going to cover what referencing is, why you need to reference when you're writing for academic assignments, when do you need to reference. We're going to have a look at different referencing styles that we use here at University of Newcastle. We're going to look at some of the referencing guides that we have. So just different ways that we support you as you're doing your referencing. We're going to have a quick look at bibliographic management software. So you might have heard of EndNote. That is the main one that we support here. So we'll have a quick look at that. And then, of course, how you get help with your referencing. So how the library can continue to support you after this webinar has finished. So firstly, what is referencing? So you hear these words a lot, referencing and citations. And really what we're talking about is just a formal way of acknowledging the sources that you use in your assignments. So when you get information, you put it into your assignment, the formal way of recognizing where you've got that information from. So a lot of the time references will refer to the reference list or the list of sources that you've used that appears at the end of your assignment. And citations can refer to references or things in the text of your assignment, but often you just hear them used interchangeably. So when you hear about referencing or citation style, we're just talking about that formal way of acknowledging your sources. And why do we need to reference? So we all know at university that you were required to do referencing, but why is it important? So the first thing is evidence. It supports your writing. It lets the reader know that the information that you've used in your assignment is reliable, credible information. And it's not just about what you put in your assignment, it's about where you're getting that information from. So not just that you've got the correct answer, but you're using good sources of information. So it provides that evidence. And it's also evidence that you've done research and you've really investigated that issue and found good sources. The next thing is really important, academic integrity. And this is taken really seriously at the University of Newcastle, where correct referencing is a way of showing that you are correctly acknowledging your sources. It's part of academic integrity and avoiding plagiarism. So if you're using information and not acknowledging where it's come from, that would be considered plagiarism or academic misconduct. So doing your referencing correctly is a way of showing academic integrity. So a really important reason for referencing. Next reason, giving credit. So the authors that you're using that have written that information have done a lot of work, and you should credit their contribution to the literature and recognize the work that they've done and where you're getting that information from. And when you're at university, you are part of that academic community, which is creating literature and using each other's sources. And it's important that everyone credits each other who has come up with those ideas or written those words. And you are also showing the information, which of the information in your assignment is written by you and what is written by other people. So it's really important to give credit. Another aspect of referencing is providing access. So when you provide a reference in your assignment, you're showing the reader where they can go to access that original source and look for more information. So being able to give enough information that they can access that original source is a really important aspect of referencing as well. And finally, last but not least, referencing is worth marks. It's always part of your assessment, and doing your referencing correctly is a really easy way of getting marks. And hopefully by doing this webinar and using the library assistance, you will find getting those marks a lot easier. So when to reference? So when talking about when to reference, I'm talking about when do you need to acknowledge a source in your assignment? And sometimes it is hard to work out. And a good rule of thumb is that anything that is not common knowledge, so something that you have to look up or that you've got from another source, needs to be referenced. And sometimes that can be difficult to work out if something is common knowledge or not. I guess you're thinking about what would an ordinary regular person know? And if you're unsure, it's always better to find a reference to back up your statements. So that includes things like direct quotations. So that is sort of the first thing we think of when we're talking about referencing. If you're taking somebody else's words and copying them exactly, you always need to reference that. And that's quite cut and dry. If you've taken a quote from somebody, you should acknowledge it. But We're also talking about more than just taking somebody's words. It includes taking their ideas as well. So if you've taken an idea from a book or a journal article and you're writing about it, even if you change the words or paraphrase it, you still need to reference them, cite them as you're using their ideas. And that also continues on through to things like theories. So if you're using a model or a theory to structure your assignment, you should acknowledge where that comes from. If you're using statistics or images and tables, you need to reference all of those things. And there are, in our guides, we have guidance on how to reference those different types of materials. Now, I did just mention referencing ideas, and a really important part of academic writing is learning how to paraphrase other people's ideas into your own words. And that forms a really important part of your academic writing. Now, at the library, we don't usually help with writing skills and numeracy skills, but I'll just take this opportunity to plug our good friends at Academic Learning Support, and they are really good at providing that type of advice. So they have online help as well at the moment. They have great online resources, including on things like paraphrasing. So if you'd like to investigate that or get their help, I highly recommend you seek out Academic Learning Support. Okay, referencing styles. So the way that you reference things can be done in a number of different ways, and it is all just formatting or style. And the style that you should use in your assignments should be given to you in your assignment question or by your lecturer in your course outline. So you should always check which style you should be using when you're starting your assignment. If it's not clear to you what style you should use, you should always check and make sure that you're using the style that your lecturers require. And it is up to the individual course and individual teachers. So you will find that some styles are more common in some disciplines. You might be using the same style right through your university degree, but it could also happen that you are sort of changing and using different styles for different assignments. Now, the most common styles at the University of Newcastle, probably APA, currently APA 7th edition. And then there's a couple of other ones like Vancouver and Harvard. And we're going to have a bit of a look at those today as well. And the library supports a range of those styles. We have guides and online support for those different styles. And that is what we're going to look at now. Any questions in the chat, Zoe?
No questions at the moment.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm just going to jump to the library website, and I will show you where we have the referencing guides. So this is just the library homepage. Just scrolling down here in this Learn section, we have referencing. And on this page, we have the different styles that we have referencing guides for. So as I mentioned, APA are very common ones, Harvard, Vancouver. AGLC is a law-based style. So if you're studying laws, you will come into contact with AGLC. So I'll just show you the APA guide just for starters. Now, the way that it works is we have a menu down the left, and all of the guides will look very similar. Some general information at the top, and then divided into resource type. So if you need to reference an article, you would go to the articles section. Also down the bottom, we have this quick guide, and the quick guide has most of the examples, the types of resources that you will need to reference, but it is a quick guide. It's not as comprehensive as this online guide here, but it is good because you can print it out, have it beside you as you're writing, use it however you like. But if you need that extra detail, please come on and have a look at this online guide. Now, in referencing, there are two main parts, and I'll show you these two sections across APA, and we'll have a look at Vancouver as well. So the first part is the in-text citation. And each of the guides will have a section on in-text citations. And there are lots of rules up here, but we're just going to have a look at this example. And you can see this in-text citation is where there has been a reference in the actual text of the writing of your essay or report. And it comes after you've referred to the information. And in APA, it's what we call a author date system. So you would need the author and the date. There's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can see this one, the author's names are outside the brackets. They are part of the sentence. So it's only the date that's included. And there are guides on how to do that in all of the different sections. But this is what we're talking about with in-text referencing. The next section, or the next aspect of referencing, is the reference list. So I'll just go to that section. And this is what appears at the end of your document and lists all the resources that you've cited within the text. And that's the way that it should work. Everything in your reference list should have been cited in an in-text citation in the text. So, sometimes you've done a lot of good research, you'll find lots of papers, but you can only put them in your reference list if you've actually used an in-text citation from that paper. So one should point to the other. They're always linked like that. And these examples set out the way you should format your reference list as well. So we have references in the center, the references in alphabetical order down here. And this is the format for each of the different references as well. So they're the two aspects. Now I'll just go back to the referencing guides and we'll have a look at Vancouver. Again, we'll look at those two aspects, the in-text and the reference list. The difference with Vancouver is that it is a numbered or footnoting system. So I'll just go to the in-text citations. And here you can see, this is an example here. There's a superscript number, which refers to the citation at the end. So it doesn't include the author or date or any information from the source in the in-text reference. It is just a number that points down to the reference list. So that's what we call footnoting, or a numbered style. So it's just the number that appears in the text. And there are a few author date systems and a few different numbered systems as well. So we'll have a look at the reference list. Again, there are examples here. Example. So it would appear like this. So reference number 1. So if the in-text citation in the text would have a 1 next to it, it would point to this entry in the reference list. So that's just an example of two different referencing styles and how they do that in-text and reference list aspects. And the in-text in both these is just really minimal details. It is the reference list entry at the end, which will include the full details of the source and provide all the information that someone would need to go and find that source again. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is actually go through finding a resource and then how you would use our guides to reference it. So I'm just going to go to the library homepage. So we'll have a look at where you can find the referencing information as well. Sorry, any questions before I start this section?
No, sorry, Michael, there's not.
No, all good, Zoe. Thank you. Okay, so I've just done a quick search for pizza and I have my results down here. Now, there is a couple of places where you can look for that information that you will need to do your referencing. The first is in this results page. You can see the title, author, date, everything like that appears here. There is also the preview section, which has some more information. There is also this button here on Library Search, cite this item. So just click that. Now, if I choose APA style, one of those ones that we just looked at, you can see that it will format a reference for me. So this is a really great way to get that information, but you do have to be very careful. It is an automated system, so it doesn't always format it correctly. So you do have to be very careful. The first thing that I can see is it hasn't done that hanging indent like APA requires. This second line should be set in from the edge. So just things like that you need to be careful of. Always check the referencing guide and make sure that everything matches. Never trust anything that's generating a reference for you completely. There is also an export citation, and as I said, we will briefly touch on EndNote later, but this is where you would export it from. And just scroll down. This one's a journal article, so we'll look at this one. It's useful to know for journal articles, especially finding this volume and issue information you can often find in the preview section, as well as DOI. And again, in this cite button, you'll see that it can generate the citation. Again, it's not doing the hanging indent. So always be careful with it. And I'm just going to go into this one. So the other place that you can look for the information, obviously, is where you can go into the resource. In this case, it's a journal database, and look for the information here. So it's usually displayed up the top. We have the title, author, date. That's the URL. That is the DOI as well. This one is displayed with the Newcastle information in it, which you want to take out of the DOI. You don't want to include that. So you would just want the DOI number that starts at 10. Now I'll just quickly go through what a DOI is. It stands for a digital object identifier, and it's basically a permanent number that gets attached to resources. So no matter if it changes publishers or locations, it's a permanent number that's always attached to that resource. So it is the easiest way for people to find it again. And if an item has a DOI, it will usually be required in your reference to mention that DOI.
Michael?
Yep.
There's just a question saying, it's said that DOI isn't necessary to include if we got it from Library Search. Is this correct?
So first up, it will depend on the style that you're using, the referencing style. But I would say usually that wasn't correct. Usually you would use the DOI from Library Search. If I can just, I'm not sure if I can get back to Sorry, I'm just going to stop share for a second so I can get back to the APA style. So if you are using APA, for example, and we'll go through this in a bit more detail soon. For that article that we were looking at, we would go to articles. I think it had 2 authors. So we would go to this section. And here are the different formats for how the reference should be formatted. So you can see the first one is article with a DOI, print or electronic. So if it has that DOI, it needs to be included. It doesn't matter where that has come from. The second example is for an article from a library database with no DOI. So this might be what you heard, sort of this type of example for a no DOI. And you do not have to include a URL, so a web address in this example. So if it's come through a library database in APA 7, you do not need to include a URL if it doesn't have a DOI. But if it does have a DOI, it should always be included. I hope, does that answer that question?
Yes, it does.
Excellent.
And it should be listed, like it should be obvious if there's a DOI or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be. Sorry, I'm just going to stop my share again so I can jump back into the database.
There's one other question, Michael.
Yep.
If we use Mendeley for referencing, still we have to check if it's followed all procedures. So do you still need to double check it?
Yep, definitely. No matter which, if you're using a bibliographic management system, if it's EndNote or Mendeley or any of the others, always check that it has formatted it correctly and check against the guide because it's not always accurate. Yep. Just share the screen again. So again, the DOI is here. And you can also see the, the DOI on the library search results page as well. So for this one, you would format the DOI as it says in the guide. For APA, you would start with the HTTP and then the doi.org, but then leave this section out and go to the starting at the 10, which is the DOI number. But you would just format it as it says in the guide. Yeah.
There's another question.
Yes.
Which one is better, Mendeley or EndNote?
So that is really up to your individual preference, how you want to use it. At the library, we provide support for EndNote. We don't really provide support for Mendeley. We can try and help you out with Mendeley, but all of our resources and really our knowledge base is around EndNote. So the library can definitely support more with EndNote, but if you prefer using Mendeley and that helps you with what you need to do, that's fine as well. That's a roundabout answer, but does that help?
Yes, they said thank you.
Excellent, no worries. Okay, so once you've collected all of this information, I'm just going to stop and go back to the guide. Once you've collected all of that information, so things like the author, the title, the year, the DOI, it's coming back and looking at the exact type of resource that you have. So I've gone to articles and 2 authors, just like we did when we were looking for the DOI before. And so we have this type, an article with a DOI. So we would be using this template, putting in all of that information. And this is APA 7 style, but no matter what style you're using, All of these details are really important. So where you're using capitals, where you're using italics, where there are spaces, brackets, all of that is part of the format of the style. And that's what you need to replicate when you're creating your references as well. So on the page, we have the templates at the top. Then we have some examples where the templates have been filled in. So this is really helpful when you're doing your own one to try and make it look similar. And then underneath that, we have in text, again, the format and an example. And all of these things, including using the ampersand instead of writing out AND, are part of the style. And finally, there are examples for direct quotations. So in APA, the difference with a direct quotation is that you would need to include the page number. So it shows you how to do that. So that's the way you would use the referencing guides. Collect that information, come back to the guide, find the appropriate resource type that you've got, and then fill it out, match that template.
There's just a question saying, where is this page from? Can you please show it once again?
Yep, sure. So I'll just start from the library homepage. Scrolling down in this Learn section, and it's referencing. So in referencing, you have the list of style guides. I was just in APA 7, but there is a whole bunch of guides for the different styles. So I'll just duck into the Vancouver style since we're here. And again, we can go to articles. In this one, there's only a difference between 1 to 6 and 7+ authors. So for 2 authors, we would go to this one. And we have our format here and examples. Okay, there's no in text here because it is just the numbered style. Okay. Any questions about how to use those referencing guides?
There's no questions coming in at the moment.
Awesome. All right. Just going to go back to the slides. Okay, so for that article that we just looked at, just quickly, a little bit of an example, how it would look in those 2 different styles. So we have APA 7th, where we'd be putting the authors first, followed by date, and then the title of the article. Now the capitalization is important, and it's a little bit tricky in this one because we have some proper nouns. But this is sentence style, as in just as you would write a sentence. The first word has a capital, and only the proper nouns within the sentence should be capitalized. Then we have the journal title, which is in italics, then the volume, issue, the page range, and the DOI. As I was trying to explain before, we have the HTTPS at the start, followed by doi.org, and then the number. And the in-text reference for this one would be the 2 authors' names and the date. Now for the exact same article in Vancouver style, we have the number of the reference. So this is our first reference in the reference list. Again, the authors, the title, the abbreviated journal title. And there is a site which is listed on the Vancouver guide that will show you how to abbreviate the journal title. And then the date, the volume, issue, page range, and DOI. So you can see we have all of the same information. It's just displayed slightly differently. So things like the date being down here, not being in brackets. The page range, we can just add the 6 here, whereas in APA style, we have to write out 366. And the DOI, not having the address, but just starting with DOI. So they're just slight differences, but they are the referencing styles. And it's just getting to know your style and checking it against the guide, making sure you're matching all of those things.
There's a question, Michael.
Yep.
Is there a correct font or size to use?
Oh, good question. No, I don't think so. It will depend on your style as well. So I would check the general rules of the different styles that you're using. But for things like APA and Vancouver, no, I don't believe there is a set font or style. Zoe or Ben, are you aware of anything different?
I think it's usually the lecturer usually gives you an indication of what's appropriate and what's not. And other than that, like your numbers in Vancouver are obviously automatic. So those are reduced in size. So you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, I'd definitely check with your lecturer.
Yeah, and generally it will be the same font and style that you're using in your assignment, so in the text. Okay. So we've had a few questions about bibliographic management software. So just quickly, this is not a session on EndNote. There will be a webinar on EndNote in a couple of weeks' time, I think the 24th of August. So if you are interested in an introduction to EndNote, that will be a great session. And as I said before, there are a number of programs. Someone mentioned Mendeley before. There's also Zotero, but the library mainly supports EndNote, and we do have a lot of help online for EndNote. So if you're interested in that, that's something that you can investigate. As we were speaking about before, it's not a substitute for knowing your referencing style. You still need to be aware of your style, check against the guide, and don't always trust that it's formatting those things 100% accurately. And we always recommend that people learn how to reference manually first. That is the best way of getting to know your referencing style. And then once you're more familiar with it, then it's much easier to transition to those management softwares. But if you know your referencing style first, it does make it a lot easier. So, and again, using EndNote or another style is up to you. It's really how you like to reference and how you like to work, how you like to write your papers. There's no need to do it. Referencing manually is just fine, but it's another tool that is out there. And I will just quickly show you where the guides are on the webpage. So again, it is in that referencing section. Underneath these styles, there is the citation management programs. We have Mendeley and Zotero on there as well. And this is an EndNote guide, which is set out like the referencing guides. And here is last semester's Intro to EndNote webinar. So there's lots of good help resources on there. So finishing up now, what next? So as I said, there is more support after the end of this webinar. Use the library referencing guides and help resources. Every time I reference something, I will check it against the guide. I always cross-reference, so they're great resources. So make use of those. If you're interested in EndNote, join the webinar. And of course, you can always get in touch with us. You can ask questions about referencing. We're here to support you doing that. You can use the Book a Librarian service where someone will sit down with you. And if you have questions about referencing, we can work through that. So there's always ways you can get in touch with us and ask those referencing questions. Okay. Now, just to finish up, sorry, just before we do that, any questions, Zoe?
No, there's no questions at the moment.
Cool. So at the moment, the library is running a survey. There are some pretty good prizes, I hear, for people participating in that. If you would like to have some input into what the library is doing, what you think about the library, please get on to the library survey and put in your feedback and get in the draw to win those prizes. We'd really appreciate people having their input into what the library is doing. So you can use the QR code there. And Zoe, if you could put a link in the chat to the survey as well, that would be awesome.
Yep, just done that.
Cool.
I heard that there's like Netflix vouchers and Visa cards, so free money.
Ooh, free money. Yep, they are sweet rewards for sure.
Do you want me to launch the last poll, Michael?
Yeah, please, Ben. So we'll just finish up with another poll. Again, if you could put some answers in there just about the session today. All right, thank you for doing those polls as well. Thanks for joining us. Yep, as I said, if you have questions about referencing, please get in, book a librarian, ask the library, and yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.